All right. So far you have seen how Hiranyakashipu had gone through tremendous austerity to get all the powers, and we also see that he is going to become the cause of creating all kinds of trouble for his own son, Prahlāda Mahārāja, whose fault is just that he was a pure devotee. He was very saintly, and Hiranyakashipu cannot tolerate it. So I just want to point out how simple-hearted Prahlāda was. It is described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, or it's captured very beautifully, that just as a 1-year-old is constantly embraced on the lap of a parent, so Prahlāda was embraced by the Lord while performing each of his activities. Only Prahlāda and no one else saw the Lord. So in this way, Prahlāda was continuously maintaining the presence of the Supreme Lord in the core of his heart as he was carrying out his activities. So, in the 29th verse of this chapter, the Supreme Lord has assured the demigods that Hiranyakashipu's death is not very far away. Now, Narada informs Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj of the cruelty of Hiranyakashipu, which will bring about the appearance of the Supreme Lord to protect Prahlāda. So in the 43rd verse, it is pointed out that demon Hiranyakashipu tormented this exalted, fortunate devotee, although Prahlāda was his own son. So this is very, very bewildering. So Prabhupada writes in the purport number 43, so here the reason is given for Hiranyakashipu's downfall. When a demon like Hiranyakashipu, despite his elevated position, due to severe austerities, begins to torment a devotee, he begins falling down, and the results of his austerities dwindle. One who oppresses a pure devotee loses all the results of his austerities, penances, and pious activities. Since Hiranyakashipu was now inclined to chastise his most exalted devotee son, Prahlāda Mahārāja, his opulences began dwindling. Now we have spent quite a bit of time discussing the exalted qualities of Prahlāda, like how he was totally non-envious, he was always undisturbed, how he was prideless, how he was always seeing others as his friend, and in this way always favorably disposed towards others. And all these qualities are based on his pure devotion to the Supreme Lord. And we saw that pure devotion is so deep that he was totally attracted and attached to the Supreme Lord. He was seeing the Supreme Lord all the time. And he was so disconnected from this material world. He just was not able to relate to anyone of this world. So all these qualities we have to keep in mind as we go through the rest of the section, and that way we will be able to appreciate how Prahlāda is able to maintain so much of balance in spite of the fact that his father is going to be extremely cruel. So Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaj is clearly shocked when he hears this, that the demon Hiranyakashipu tormented this exalted devotee, although Prahlāda was his own son. And therefore he asks questions. So the question that he is asking is that could Hiranyakashipu have actually been violent with Prahlāda, his well-behaved, obedient, respectful son? Is it even possible? How is it possible? How did Hiranyakashipu give so much trouble to Prahlāda Mahārāja? Although Prahlāda was his own son. And he says, I wish to know about this subject from you. So could a father's hatred be so intense that he would try to kill his own son? That's the question that Yudhiṣṭhira is placing before Narada. And in order to respond to this question, the next 3 chapters, 5, 6 and 7, are dedicated to further glorifying Prahlāda Mahārāja's devotional character and activities. Now, another interesting point to note, we could see after Hiranyakashipu's brother Hiranyaksha was killed by the Supreme Lord Vishnu, Hiranyakashipu became so inimical towards Lord Vishnu, and his program of doing austerity was all about taking revenge for his brother, and become so great and so powerful that nobody can even come close to defeating him. And he achieved all of these things, and yet he was totally dissatisfied. And we saw how Hiranyakashipu was even able to pacify his relatives when Hiranyaksha was killed. And in this way, it may seem like Hiranyakashipu is very wise, He knows so much that he has the capacity to pacify others when they are not able to process some difficulties in life. And likewise, we saw how Hiranyakashipu pacified Lord Brahma, not pacified, but went through many exalted prayers to Lord Brahma to get his attention. So all these externally may look like Hiranyakashipu is a very exalted person. On the other hand, Prahlāda, we will see, he is going to refuse to learn from his teachers, and he would also defy the instructions from his father in various ways. So to a bystander, if you just evaluate the external situation, it may look like Prahlāda is not necessarily being a good student. But if we keep all these devotional characteristics that we just discussed in our mind, as we go through the external circumstances, we would be able to process the storyline much better. Therefore, understanding events while being aware of the consciousness in which those events are getting experienced will allow us to distinguish a demon from a devotee. Okay, so now the 5th chapter begins with Narada responding to Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaja's question that how could Hiranyakashipu be so cruel to his own son. So now he starts giving the background. We have already discussed about the qualities of Prahlāda Mahārāja. Now we are going to see those qualities of Prahlāda Mahārāja come alive as a part of the events that are following. So Yudhiṣṭhira Maharaja's question was about cause of Hiranyakashipu's hostility towards his own son. So Narad Muni begins. The great saint Narad Muni said, the demons headed by Hiranyakashipu accepted Shukracharya as their priest for ritualistic ceremonies. Shukracharya's 2 sons, Shanda and Amarka, lived near Hiranyakashipu's palace. Let's read purport number 1, which sets the scene for how things are already in a state of disarray in Hiranyakashipu's kingdom. So Prabhupada writes, the beginning of the life story of Prahlāda is recounted as follows. Shukracharya became the priest of the atheists, especially Hiranyakashipu, and thus his 2 sons, Shanda and Amarka, resided near Hiranyakashipu's residence. Shukracharya should not have become the priest of Hiranyakashipu because Hiranyakashipu and his followers were all atheists. A Brahmana should become the priest of a person interested in the advancement of spiritual culture. The very name Shukracharya, however, indicates a person interested in obtaining benefits for his sons and descendants. Because Shukra means semen, Shukracharya. So that's why the name Shukracharya literally means one who is always there to propagate one seminal line. And therefore this person is interested in obtaining benefits for his sons and descendants, regardless of how the money comes. A real Brahmana would not become a priest for atheistic men. So there is already a problem, you can see, right at the outset. And into this dysfunctional scene, Narad Muni now introduces a Mahabhagavat, a great devotee, Prahlāda. Prahlāda Mahārāja was already educated in devotional life. How exactly he was educated in devotional life, we will come to know later. But when his father sent him to those two sons of Shukracharya to be educated, so of course, if Shukracharya is so money-minded, if he is not performing the duty of a real Brahmana, you can also imagine his two sons would also be like that. Therefore, when his father sent him to those two sons of Shukracharya to be educated, they accepted him at their school along with the other sons of the Asuras. So Asuras mean demons. Prahlāda suddenly heard and recited the topics of politics and economics taught by the teachers. But he understood that political philosophy involves considering someone a friend and someone else an enemy. And thus, he as in Prahlāda, did not like it. Very interestingly, you can relate this to the chapter 1 of this 7th canto, where Parikshit had asked Shukadeva Goswami to speak about how the Supreme Lord is impartial. Impartial meaning one who doesn't distinguish between friends and enemies, right? In the very first 3 verses, this topic of friends and enemies came into the picture. That how is it possible that Vishnu, being everyone's well-wisher, be treating someone as a friend and others as enemies? And so this point is coming back here. So that therefore you can see that how inappropriate it is for the Supreme Lord to distinguish between friends and enemies. So likewise, Shukadeva Goswami's response is carrying us to Prahlāda Mahārāja now, who is such a great soul that just like the Supreme Lord, he is also averse to making such distinctions. And Prabhupada writes in the purport number 3, politics involves accepting one group of men as enemies and another group as friends. Everything in politics is based on this philosophy, this friends and enemy essentially. And the entire world, especially at the present, is engrossed in it. The public is concerned with friendly countries and friendly groups, or enemy countries and enemy groups. But as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, a learned person does not make distinctions between enemies and friends. Devotees especially do not create friends and enemies. A devotee sees that every living being is a part and parcel of Krishna. Mamaya vansha jiva bhutaha. Therefore, a devotee treats friends and enemies equally by trying to educate them both in Krishna consciousness. Of course, atheistic men do not follow the instructions of pure devotees, but instead consider a devotee their enemy. A devotee, however, never creates a situation of friendship and enmity. Although Prahlāda Mahārāja was obliged to hear the instructions of Shanda and Amarka, he did not like the philosophy of friends and enemies, which forms the basis of politics. He was not interested in this philosophy. And after this, we will see the most interesting circumstances following from here. The first time Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad are going to meet after Prahlad had gone through the education system that is laid down by Shanda and Amarka, which are all on the basis of distinguishing between friends and enemies and discussing the topics of politics and economics. And we are going to see how that encounter is. The next section that we are going to see, that they are going to form some of the most important sections of the whole Bhagavatam. So we see that on Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.